monitors went flat. 3 specialists walked out of that room, and Marcus Hale, billionaire, empire builder, the man who had never lost anything in his life, was declared dead at 11:47 p.m. His daughter sat outside that door and fell apart in silence. The nurses dimmed the lights. The paperwork began. It was over. And then, a 3-year-old girl in a pink dress wandered down that corridor alone in the middle of the night. She climbed onto the bed, pressed her tiny hand against Marcus's face, and started talking to him. Not crying, not praying, just talking. The way children talk to things they believe can still hear them. By morning, everything had changed. Not because of the specialists, not because of the machines, because of a little girl who refused to believe it was over. And her mother, a cleaning lady who made one decision that night that nobody saw coming. This is their story. If this is your first time here, welcome to Kindness Tales. Hit that subscribe button and drop a comment below. Tell us, have you ever witnessed a moment that you simply could not explain? Because today's story is exactly that. And I promise you, by the time we reach the end, you will not be the same person who pressed play. The monitors went flat at 11:47 in the evening. Not slowly, not with warning. Flat. 3 specialists had been in that room for hours. A cardiologist flown in from Boston at considerable expense. A neurologist with 3 decades of experience who had seen things in that career that most people could not imagine. And a critical care physician who had built his entire reputation on never walking away without certainty. That night, all 3 of them walked away. They stood in the corridor and used careful, precise language to explain to Marcus Hale's daughter what the monitors already said. Sarah stood and listened and showed none of it on her face. She had learned that from her father. Rooms read your face before they read your words. She waited until they were gone. Then she pressed her back against the wall and slid down it until she was sitting on the hospital floor, and she stayed there a long time in the silence that only exists in hospitals at midnight. Marcus Hale was 58 years old. He had spent 3 decades building a real estate empire across 4 continents. Financial publications had described him as visionary, relentless, and difficult in roughly equal measure, and he had never disputed any of the 3. He had arrived at the hospital 11 days earlier, following a cardiac event that his housekeeper had recognized and responded to with a speed the paramedics later described as the reason he arrived alive at all. She had taken a first aid course the previous year and had never mentioned it to anyone because it had not seemed like something that required mentioning. The first week looked manageable. Then the second event arrived, and the specialists gathered, and the careful language began. And now the most powerful man in the city was lying in a dimmed room with paperwork already started in his name. And nobody, not one person in that building, believed morning would look any different. Her name was Ada Wren. She was 34 years old and had been cleaning the 4th floor of that hospital for 9 years. 9 years of night shifts, of corridor lights at 2 in the morning, of learning the rhythm of that building, the way sailors learn the sea, not from textbooks, but from being inside it long enough that it becomes part of you. She was working toward a nursing qualification she had been building slowly, one examination at a time, around the edges of night shifts and single parenthood, and a budget that left no room anywhere for mistakes. She was precise, quiet, and completely invisible to most of the people she passed in those corridors, which meant most of those people had absolutely no idea what Ada Wren was capable of. Her daughter's name was Lily, 3 years old. Dark eyes exactly like her mother's, and an entirely original understanding of how the world worked. Lily had grown up surrounded by adults doing serious things in serious places, and she had absorbed without anyone intending it a quality of presence that most adults spend their whole lives trying to find. Ada brought her on night shifts when the hospital family room was available. The supervisor on the 4th floor, a woman named Marguerite, who had worked that building for 21 years, had developed a precise sense of what required formal attention and what did not. A toddler sleeping in a portable cot in the family room did not require formal attention, but 3-year-olds have their own relationship with staying where they are put. It was sometime after 2 in the morning when Ada came back to check and found the cot empty. The door was open. She moved into the corridor the way 9 years of night shift work teaches a person to move and followed the hallway down past the nurse's station, past the supply room, past the room where the monitors had gone flat earlier that evening. She stopped. The door to Marcus Hale's room had a latch that had been stiff for a week. It was on the maintenance list. It had not yet been reached. Lily had pushed it open with the complete physical commitment of a child who has identified a destination and does not consider logistics an obstacle. Ada stood in the doorway, and what she saw made her forget, for a moment, every protocol she had ever learned in 9 years on that floor. Lily was on the bed. She had climbed up the way she climbed everything. Total commitment. No hesitation. She was lying against the man's side with her teddy bear pressed carefully against his chest. Her small hand was resting on his face, on his cheek, with a gentleness that looked in the low light of that room like something chosen. And she was talking to him, not loudly. In the quiet, unhurried, completely unbothered way she talked to her stuffed animals when she thought no one was listening. Ada could not hear the words from the doorway, just the tone. The absolutely certain tone of a child addressing something she believes is completely present. Ada stood there and did not move. She knew she should go in immediately. She knew that. But something in that room stopped her. Something she could not name then, and has never been fully able to name since. And then, the monitor changed. Ada had spent 9 years on that floor. 9 years of watching monitors the way you watch weather when you live somewhere unpredictable, not officially, not with any authority, but with the particular attention of someone who has been in the same room with something long enough to feel when it shifts. And what she saw on that screen was not a dramatic change. It was not the kind of thing that happens in films with alarms and rushing feet. It was smaller than that. A rhythm that had been doing one thing began doing something slightly different. Something that looked, to Ada's 9 years of quiet, unauthorized observation, like a man who had been very far away and had just heard something worth turning back for. She did not take Lily off that bed. She crossed the room, sat in the chair beside it, and placed her hand over her daughter's hand, the one resting on Marcus Hale's face, and she stayed. She did not call anyone. She did not move. She just stayed. And what happened in that room over the next 2 hours is the part of this story that nobody has ever been able to put cleanly into a report. Now, before we go further, and I need you to hear this part carefully, because what made that moment possible did not begin in that hospital room. It did not begin that night. It began years earlier with 3 people who never knew each other, never met, and had absolutely no idea they were connected. There was a daycare director named Dora who had been accepting Ada's payments 2 weeks late for over a year without once making her feel it. She would simply say these things have a way of working out, and that she trusted Ada completely. That trust kept Lily in a safe place while Ada worked nights, which meant Ada could keep working nights, which meant Ada was on that floor. There was a doctor named Dr. Ferris who worked the day shift on the 4th floor and had been quietly leaving nursing textbooks from the library discard pile on Ada's cleaning cart for 3 years. Each one with a small handwritten note inside that said simply, "Thought this might be useful." Those books were how Ada knew what she was looking at when the monitor shifted, and there was a parking attendant named Otto who had seen Ada arrive soaked 4 mornings in a row during the winter Lily was sick because Ada would not spend money on covered parking when covered parking was the difference between Lily's antibiotics and not. Otto handed her an access card, said it was a spare, and had been quietly renewing it every 6 months since. None of these 3 people knew each other. None of them knew they were part of anything. They were just people who noticed someone and made a small decision. But those small decisions built a chain. And that chain put Ada Wren on the 4th floor on the specific night that Marcus Hale needed someone to stay. At 4:23 in the morning, Marcus moved his head. It was slight. It was not the dramatic return that people imagine when they imagine someone coming back. It was just a man, turning his head slightly, as though something had reached him somewhere very deep down, and he was trying to find his way toward it. Ada pressed the call button. She pressed it once, calmly, the way you do something when you are certain. Mernetta arrived in 40 seconds. She was the night nurse, a woman whose name was written on the whiteboard in careful block letters, a woman who had seen enough on that floor to not be easily shaken. She looked at the monitors. Then she looked at Lily, still asleep against Marcus's side, teddy bear pressed against his chest. Then she looked at Ada. She said, "How long have you been in here?" Ada said, "About 2 hours." Mernetta looked at the monitors one more time and then said quietly that she needed to call the team and asked Ada to take Lily back to the family room. Ada lifted Lily carefully. Lily made a small sound, pulled the teddy bear tighter against herself, and did not fully wake. Ada carried her down the corridor in the 4 a.m. quiet of that building and sat with her in the family room and listened as the sounds of the medical team moving through the floor told her that something had shifted in a direction nobody had predicted a few hours earlier. She sat there and did not know what to do with her hands, so she just held her daughter and waited. Marcus Hale opened his eyes 4 days later, not all at once. In stages, the way someone surfaces from very far down, from somewhere the light takes a while to reach. By the end of that week, he was awake for hours at a time, aware, present, asking questions in the direct way that had apparently been a lifelong characteristic. Sarah sat beside the bed on a Tuesday afternoon, and he looked at her and said, "I'm hungry." She laughed in a way she had not laughed in 2 weeks, and then he asked her about the night of the 4th. He said he needed to know exactly what happened in that room. Sarah told him everything she knew, and when she finished, Marcus was quiet for a long time. Then he said, "Find her." Sarah found Ada in the corridor 3 days later, still pushing her cart, still working her floor, because the 4th floor still needed cleaning regardless of what had happened on it. Ada saw Sarah coming and immediately apologized for not removing Lily from the room sooner and said she understood completely if there were consequences. Sarah looked at her for a moment. Then she asked one question. She said, "What was Lily doing when you found her?" Ada said, "She had her hand on his face. She was talking to him." Sarah asked what she thought Lily was saying, and Ada said something that stopped the conversation completely. And when Marcus heard what Ada said, what Lily had apparently been whispering to him in that dark room in the middle of the night, he turned his face toward the window and did not speak for a very long time. Before we get to that, drop a comment right now. Have you ever judged someone by what they do for a living, only to find out later that you had completely, entirely missed who they actually were? Because Ada Wren pushed a mop down that corridor for 9 years, and not one person who passed her thought she was the most important person in the building. Leave your answer below, because part 3 is where everything, every small decision, every quiet act, every person who never knew they were part of something, it all comes together, and I promise you, you are not ready for how this ends. Ada said she did not know what Lily was saying. She said Lily talks to everything, her bears, the plants at home, the pigeons on the windowsill outside their apartment. She said Lily believes everything can hear her. And Sarah sat with that for a moment, in the corridor beside the cleaning cart, and then said something so quiet that Ada almost missed it. She said, "Maybe everything can." That was the whole conversation. No dramatic exchange, no tearful embrace, just 2 women standing in a hospital corridor with a cart between them and a truth neither of them fully had the language for. Sarah walked back to her father's room. Ada finished her shift. And for 3 more days, life on the 4th floor continued exactly as it always had. Except that Marcus Hale was alive inside it, and he had questions that nobody in that building could answer for him. He asked to meet Lily on a Thursday morning. The meeting was arranged quietly, without ceremony, the way Marcus apparently preferred things. Direct, no performance, no audience. Lily arrived in her pink dress holding her teddy bear, walked into a room full of monitors and tubes and the heavy machinery of serious medical circumstance, and was completely unbothered by any of it. She looked around the room the way she looked around every room, with total ownership, total ease, as though she had already decided it was a place she belonged. Then she climbed onto the bed, same way as before, same committed purposefulness, no hesitation, no asking permission. She pressed the teddy bear against his chest exactly as she had that night, and looked at his face very carefully, the way small children examine things they are genuinely interested in. Then she said, "You look better." Marcus Hale, who had not cried in front of another person in 20 years, looked at the ceiling for a long moment. Then he said, "I feel better." She patted his cheek twice with her small hand, looked around the room with fresh curiosity, and asked if there was juice. There was juice, and somehow, in the middle of everything, the specialists, the paperwork, The flatlined monitors, the 2 hours in a dark room that nobody could explain. That was the moment that broke him open completely. He asked Ada what she needed, not as a performance, not as the kind of generosity that is really about the person giving it, as a genuine question from someone who had decided to do something with the answer and needed accurate information to do it well. Ada told him about the nursing qualification, the 2 remaining examinations, the cost of the examination fees, the childcare that disappeared every time she tried to study past 10 at night because the shelter program cut off at a fixed hour regardless of what was sitting unfinished in front of her. She told him clearly and without softening any of it, because Ada Wren had not survived 9 years of night shifts and single parenthood by being imprecise about what she needed. Marcus listened without interrupting. Then he asked one question. He said, "How long would it take if those obstacles were removed?" She said, "A year, maybe less." He made 4 calls that afternoon. And this is the part that matters most, the part that says everything about who Marcus Hale actually was beneath the financial publications and the 4-continent empire. He did not write a check. He did not create something new. What his calls uncovered was that every single resource Ada needed, the childcare support, the study access program, the examination fee assistance, already existed. It had been there the whole time. Ada had been eligible for all of it. She simply had not known because nobody had told her, and she had not had the hours free to find out herself. Marcus did not give Ada anything that was not already hers. He just removed the distance between her and it. And that distinction mattered enormously to Ada. She had told him clearly at the beginning. She did not want it made easy. She wanted it made possible. And those are completely different things. She sat her first remaining examination 4 months later. She passed. She sat the second 3 months after that, in a small testing room on a Tuesday morning with Lily in school and the 4th floor carrying on without her for a few hours. When the results came through, she was back on shift, pushing her cart down the corridor the same way she had pushed it for 9 years. Her phone lit up. She stopped walking. She stood completely still in the middle of that hallway for a moment that she has never been fully able to describe. Then she went to the family room and sat down and was quiet for a while, just her and the result on the screen and 9 years of 2 a.m. corridors and late payments and textbooks left on a cart and a parking card renewed every 6 months by a man who never asked for anything in return. Mernetta found her there. She looked at the phone and then at Ada's face and knew immediately what she was seeing. She sat down beside her. After a moment she said, "I knew you would." Ada said, "You didn't know me when I started." Mernetta said, "I knew you by the 2nd week." And that was that. No speeches, no ceremony. Just 2 women sitting in a hospital family room on a Tuesday, one of them holding a result that 9 years of invisible, unwitnessed persistence had finally made real. Marcus said to Sarah once, during his recovery, that he did not know what Lily did in that room. Sarah said, "Neither does she. She was just there." He said, "That's the whole thing, isn't it?" Sarah looked at him and said, "That's the whole thing. Never underestimate the woman pushing the cart down the corridor. Never underestimate her daughter. Never underestimate what 9 years of quiet, unseen persistence looks like from the inside, or what it becomes when it arrives in exactly the right room at exactly the right moment." The most important thing that happened in that hospital on the night of the 4th was not recorded in any report. It was a child's hand on a man's face. And a mother who stood in the doorway and, for reasons she still cannot fully explain, did not interrupt. And Lily, she still talks to everything. Her bears, the plants, the pigeons. She still believes everything can hear her. And if you ask Ada whether she thinks her daughter is wrong, Ada, who stood in that doorway at 2 in the morning and watched the monitor shift and felt something in that room that no training had ever prepared her for, she will pause. And then she will say something that once you hear it, you will not be able to stop thinking about. She will pause. And then Ada will say that she does not know what Lily was telling Marcus in that room. She was not close enough to hear the words, but she knows her daughter. She knows the tone Lily uses when she is talking to something she loves, that quiet, unhurried, completely certain tone that has no doubt in it anywhere. And she knows that whatever Lily said to Marcus Hale in that dark room at 2 in the morning, she meant every word of it with her whole 3-year-old heart. Whether that means anything scientifically, medically, clinically, Ada cannot tell you. She is a nurse now. She understands the body. She respects what can be measured and proven and documented. But she was also standing in that doorway. She also watched the monitor shift. And she has spent a long time sitting with the gap between what she knows professionally and what she felt in that room. And she has made a quiet peace with the fact that some things live in that gap permanently and do not need to be pulled out of it to be real. Marcus recovered fully over the following months. Not quickly. He was 58 years old, and his body had been through something serious, and it communicated that clearly throughout the process. But steadily, purposefully, in the same relentless way he had apparently built everything else in his life, except this time without the difficult part, according to Sarah, who said that whatever happened in that hospital changed something in her father that 3 decades of success and acquisition had not touched. He became, in her words, easier to be around, not softer exactly, still direct, still precise, still allergic to anything performative or wasteful. But there was something underneath all of that now that had not been visible before, a quality of attention. The particular attentiveness of someone who has been to the edge of everything and come back understanding, in a way that cannot be faked or learned from a book, that the most important things are almost never the loudest ones in the room. He stayed in Lily's life. That part was never formally arranged or discussed. It simply happened the way things happen when a 3-year-old decides someone belongs in her orbit. Completely, without negotiation. Without any awareness that the other person might have a different opinion on the matter. She called him by a nickname that developed over months of visits and could not quite be translated into adult language. What it meant, roughly, was the man who came back. Because that is how Lily understood the whole story. Not as a miracle. Not as something inexplicable. Simply as a man who had gone somewhere very far away and then came back. And she had talked to him while he was gone so he would know which direction to return from. That was her version. And honestly, standing next to it, every other version feels slightly less complete. Dora, the daycare director, found out what had happened about a year after the night of the 4th. Someone who knew Ada told someone who knew Dora, and eventually the story made its way back. Dora called Ada on a Wednesday evening and could not finish her sentences properly and kept stopping and starting and finally just said, "I always knew. I always knew there was something in you that was going to matter." Ada told her about the late payments, how Dora had never once made her feel it, how that had kept her going on the specific mornings when keeping going had felt genuinely impossible. Dora was quiet for a moment and then said, "Oh honey, that was nothing." Ada said, "It was everything." And both of them were right. Harold, the retired paramedic, heard through a letter Ada wrote him. He wrote back on paper so old it had yellowed at the edges and said he had run those second Sunday sessions for 11 years, and this was the first time he had ever heard what happened after. Otto, the parking attendant, found out when Ada told him directly in the parking structure on a morning shift, standing beside the barrier with the access card in her hand. He did not say much. He nodded slowly the way people nod when something confirms what they already quietly believed. Then he said, "Keep the card," and went back to work. None of those 3 people attended a ceremony. None of them received an award. None of them were in the room when Ada got her results, or when Marcus opened his eyes, or when Lily pressed her teddy bear against a dying man's chest in the middle of the night and talked to him in the dark. But all of them were there. Every single one of them was in that room. That is the thing about quiet decency. It does not announce itself, and it does not wait around to be credited. It just moves through people and keeps moving long after the person who started it has forgotten they did anything at all. And somewhere at the end of a chain they never knew they were part of, something impossible becomes possible. And a man comes back from somewhere very far away, and a little girl in a pink dress asks if there is juice. And life, improbably and without any satisfying explanation, continues. Sarah said something once that Marcus wrote down and kept. She said the night nurses, and the cleaning staff, and the parking attendants, and the daycare directors, they are not the background of the story. They are the story. Every single time. We just keep making the mistake of watching the wrong people. Marcus, who had spent 30 years being one of the people everyone watched, said nothing for a moment. Then he said, "I know that now. I had to die first, but I know that now." And the way he said it, not with bitterness, not with drama, just with the plain, undecorated weight of something genuinely understood, was the most honest thing Sarah had ever heard her father say. Lily is 6 now. She still talks to everything. Her bears, the plants, the pigeons, the old man at the bus stop, the elevator when it takes too long, the moon on clear nights through her bedroom window. Ada watches her sometimes and feels something that does not have a clean name, something between wonder and recognition, and a gratitude so large it has no edges. She became a nurse because she wanted to understand how the body works, how to help it, how to be useful inside the serious moments that other people's lives produce. She is all of those things now, but she knows, in the place where she keeps what she actually believes, that the most useful thing she has ever done in that hospital had nothing to do with anything she studied. It was standing in a doorway at 2 in the morning and not interrupting. That was it. That was the whole thing. If this story stayed with you, if Ada's 9 years of invisible persistence meant something to you, if Lily's certainty moved you, if you saw yourself somewhere in this story, in the Doras and the Harolds and the Ottos who never knew they were part of something, then please subscribe to Kindness Tales. Not because of the numbers, because there are more stories like this one, stories about people who are never in the headline, but are always the reason. Stories that remind you that the most powerful thing in any room is almost never the most obvious one. We tell these stories because they are true in the way that matters most, not always in their details, but always in what they understand about people. And people, when you look at them carefully and without judgment, are so much more than they appear. Subscribe, stay with us, because the next story might be the one that changes something in you that needed changing, and you will not want to have missed it.